She was 19, innocent and sold to a 75-year-old billionaire sheikh. On that wedding night, he wanted only one thing to legalize the marriage. But what happened in that bed shocked the entire world. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and give a like, because this story is unforgettable. Now, take a deep breath, because what follows is heartbreaking. She was only 19, and that day she heard a phrase from her mother that changed everything. "This is the only way to save the winery." She thought it was a joke, but her father's eyes left no doubt. The offer was real, official, and had a price no daughter should have to pay. The 75-year-old billionaire sheikh was ready to pay all the family's debts in exchange for a young wife. Not an actress, not a model, but a well-brought-up, modest woman from a traditional European family. "He wants someone like you," the lawyer said, pushing the contract across the table. On paper, everything looked very beautiful. Golden seals, official stamps, clauses in French and Arabic. But none of it seemed fair, because even without words, she understood immediately. She was being traded for money. For the sake of the winery, for her family's survival, for her coming days. For days, she resisted, screamed, cried, threatened to run away. But everything was already decided. "It's a symbolic marriage," her father insisted. "He's an old man, he probably just needs company." She believed him, wanted to believe. The agreement was signed by international lawyers, with a Moroccan representative acting as a mediator. The family received financial protection immediately. Debts were frozen, the winery was taken off auction, and she lost her freedom. The flight to Marrakech was scheduled for the following Saturday. She flew alone on a quiet plane, not knowing if she was heading towards a new life or its end. The fear came not from the sounds, but from the silence. The silence of the contract, the silence of her parents, and the silence she carried in her heart. The silence of someone who had already said yes, but never wanted to. When she arrived in Morocco, she was met with great pomp, a black armored car, a silent driver, a luxurious hotel booked just for her. But none of it felt like a gift. Everything felt like preparation. In the car, she looked out the window and saw a city full of life. Children playing, vibrant stalls, palm trees swaying in the warm breeze. And she thought, how can the world be so bright while I'm marrying a 75-year-old man? The day before the ceremony, already at the Sheikh's palace, she heard from the assistants. "He is very much looking forward to meeting you, madam." Her eyes widened. "Meeting? What do you mean? Won't the marriage be legalized?" She froze. She thought the marriage was just a formality, but no one had guaranteed it, neither her father, nor the lawyers, nor the contract. That night, alone in her room, she realized, I might have to lie with him, and no one will come to save me. On the morning of the wedding day, the palace was quiet, but it was not a quiet of peace, but one of control. She woke up early, having not slept. The assistants entered the room with strained smiles, white dresses in their hands, and sweet words that only intensified the feeling of confinement. "Today is your great day, madam." "Oh, great." She wanted to laugh or scream. Dressing took almost an hour. Pure silk, a pearl necklace, a light perfume behind her neck. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked like a bride, but felt like packaged goods. In the main hall, the ceremony was ready. A few guests, all in impeccable suits, with neutral faces diplomats, ambassadors, lawyers. None of her family was there. No one hugged her. No one looked at her as a daughter, as a person. In the center of the hall stood the groom, Tariq ibn Rashid. He was dressed in traditional attire, a dark turban, and exuded confidence, health, and pride. His eyes glittered when he saw her, and it was not tenderness, but possession. He was pleased, happy to know that in a few hours he would have what he desired, a young, virginal, Western wife. The previous ones, all older than him, no longer interested him. Tariq wanted novelty, youth, obedience. She swallowed hard. The ceremony officiant made official introductions in Arabic and French. She responded only when necessary, signing papers she no longer truly processed, accepting the ring, the blessing, and her new title. She was officially a wife. After the ceremony, the sheikh approached, bending down to gently kiss her hand. She remained still, a quiet stillness. "You are even more beautiful than I was promised," he said, smiling, though she felt a knot in her stomach. Later, as evening drew near, she was guided down a hushed corridor, through stately doors and heavy curtains, into a tranquil inner garden. The maids left her at a grand golden door. "This is your wing, madam," they murmured. "And where is Mr. Tariq?" she inquired softly. "He will come later, as tradition dictates," they replied. The door closed, leaving her alone in the lavish room. She lay on a bed she hadn't chosen, her heart aflutter, too restless for sleep, her mind fixated on a single thought. Would this night truly unfold as feared? The room was vast and silent, perhaps a little too cool. Its decor was rich and opulent, yet somehow lacked warmth. Golden furniture, heavy drapes, and a prominent mirror across from the bed. Everything seemed designed to impress, perhaps even to awe. She sat on the edge of the bed, her heart still racing, her feet cool, and her hands resting uncertainly in her lap. A part of her longed to escape, but there was nowhere to go. Suddenly, the door opened. Two maids entered, their heads modestly bowed. Without needing to ask permission, they announced, "You must take a bath and put on the clothes left for tonight." She remained still, unmoving. But the women seemed to know their duty. They prepared the bath, leaving delicate, almost sheer clothing in plain view. It felt less like a nightgown and more like a symbolic gesture of yielding. "Mr. Tariq will arrive soon," one of them said, her voice neutral. "He prefers everything according to tradition." Tradition, that's how they framed it? She entered the bath as if fulfilling an inevitable duty. She washed in quiet contemplation, then donned the light, nearly transparent garment that hinted at her form. Returning to the room, she settled back onto the bed. There was no comfortable cover to draw, no easy breath to take. A few minutes later, he arrived. The soft click of the doorknob echoed in the stillness. She instinctively tensed, though she didn't physically move. Tariq entered slowly, dressed in traditional attire, his face freshly shaven, his perfume a little strong. His gaze lingered on her with an eager intensity. He closed the door behind him and approached the bed as if claiming what was rightfully his. He paused before her, offering a smile. "You are beautiful," he said. She didn't respond. He tilted his head slightly, his voice low and firm. "Please, remove your clothes." A heavy silence. "I wish to see what is now mine." She swallowed, her trembling hands unfastened the silk, and the fabric drifted from her shoulders, falling softly onto the bed. She stood exposed, her eyes lowered. "Lie on the bed," he instructed, "and arrange yourself as a wife should on the first night. Do not make me ask again." Slowly, she lay down, turning towards the wall, a deep sense of despair in her heart. Tariq watched her silently, his chest rising and falling with anticipation, his eyes gleaming. He gently lay on the bed, the mattress yielding beneath his weight. Moving closer, he said, "I will explain what happens next." She held her breath. "It might be uncomfortable, but you must remain still. No flinching, no sounds. You can clench the sheet if you need to, but once I begin, I will not stop." A silent tear escaped her eye. She did not blink. Her face remained turned away, though her muscles quivered. Tariq leaned even closer, now murmuring into her ear. His voice was laced with a deep desire and a commanding tone. "You will allow this to happen. You will yield without struggle, without resistance. You were destined for this and will endure everything to the very end." Isla didn't reply, but her entire being felt frozen. Her gaze was lost on the ceiling, her spirit far away. Tariq settled himself between her legs, leaned in, pressed his face to her neck, inhaled the scent of her skin deeply, and whispered hoarsely, "Quickly! I am eager to be with you as soon as possible." But before making any move, he paused. His breath hitched. His eyes widened, then slowly closed, as if the light within him dimmed. His body tensed for a second, held still, and then went completely limp. Heavy, without resistance, lifeless, as if something within him had simply ceased to function. Isla remained motionless. She felt the weight of his body, his head pressing on her shoulder, his arm thrown over her stomach, the warmth of his breath disappearing. "Tariq," she whispered, almost inaudibly. There was no answer. She tried to push him away, but he was too heavy. She managed to move his torso only a few inches. She was suffocating from the touch, from what was happening, from the horror. "Help!" she screamed, using her last breaths. The door burst open. The maids rushed in screaming, followed quickly by two guards. One sharply pulled the Sheikh's body away, the other covered him with a sheet. The room descended into chaos. Doctors were called, the corridor filled with commands in Arabic, hurried footsteps, and tense voices. Isla was taken to another room, still wrapped in the sheet, pale, in a state of shock. She couldn't cry or speak. She just felt a cruel emptiness, as if the world had gone out. Hours later, she learned the truth. Tariq had suffered a severe, irreversible stroke, fallen into a coma, was hooked up to machines, unresponsive, and would not return. For the next 3 months, Ayla lived in the palace, forbidden to leave, with no contact with the outside world, as if she still belonged to him, even when he was unconscious. Until one stuffy morning, a maid entered and simply said, "Mr. Tariq passed away last night." On the table lay an envelope, the will. The wife he never managed to possess was named a partial heir. No one ever mentioned that night, and she never spoke of it either, because that night never happened. The funeral was modest, without cameras or speeches, just a quick ceremony surrounded by security and silence. Ayla was allowed to attend, despite being a widow and legal wife. The next day, the Sheikh's lawyer arrived at the palace in a dark suit with a folder in his hands and an impassive expression. "The will was opened this morning," he said directly, "and you are in it." Ayla didn't even react. She didn't know if it was a reward or a curse. A clause in the marriage contract was clear. The marriage had to be legalized for the inheritance rights to take effect. But no one knew exactly what happened that night, and Tariq never spoke. He chose silence. Silence that for many meant everything or nothing. But no one expected what would happen next. The secret. The Sheikh left a personal testamentary disposition, granting her a portion of the estate, real estate, shares, a lifetime annuity, all within Moroccan inheritance law. It was an individual, deliberate, and irrevocable decision. A gift or a trap? Perhaps it was his way of saying, "You will bear my name, with or without love, with or without desire, and the whole world will know it." But for the Sheikh's children, it was an insult. The attacks began that same day. Leaks to the press, articles questioning her origins, rumors of witchcraft, seduction, and that she was only there for gain, as if she had deceived a powerful man to seize his fortune. Young Spanish widow becomes millionaire in less than 3 months. Read the headlines. Ayla remained silent, gave no interviews, and made no public appearances. But that didn't stop her from becoming a target. The Sheikh's family hired lawyers and filed a lawsuit to annul the will, claiming he was ill, vulnerable, under influence, that she had taken advantage of an old and weak man. And, most importantly, that the clause about legalizing the marriage had not been fulfilled. "This inheritance is a disgrace," one of the elder daughters declared in an interview with the Dubai channel. "This woman stole what belonged to us." But nothing created as much tension as the news that came 2 weeks later. Zahir was returning. The youngest son, a graduate of international law from the University of London who had been absent for over 5 years. Reserved, intelligent, and dangerous. He won't rest until he clears his father's name, they said. Ayla heard it on television, sitting on the sofa with the windows closed. In a world crumbling around her, she knew what was coming wouldn't just be a lawsuit. It would be a personal war, and she was the target. 7 years passed, and Ayla disappeared. Not from official documents, but from life. Now she lived in the south of Spain, in an old house among the hills of Cadiz with white walls, heavy curtains, and a simple fenced garden. There, she woke up every day at 6, 0 a.m., drank tea, read quietly, walked without parties, without public appearances, without interviews. The inheritance was kept secret. The court closed the case due to lack of evidence of manipulation, but her name was never cleared. Some said she was a cold woman, others a cunning victim, but no one knew exactly what happened that night. She never spoke of the marriage, nor the death, nor the will. She hired a small group of discreet, loyal men as bodyguards, paid to protect her from everything: the press, the curious, the story itself. She lived as if carrying a ghost, with eyes constantly vigilant and a tired soul. She spent her days not talking to anyone, tending the garden, or sitting on the porch, watching the wind sway the olive trees. She tried to forget, but her body remembered everything, sometimes trembling in the dark. And even after all this time, peace did not come, because Ayla knew that stories like hers didn't end in silence. They just paused for a while, and that time was coming to an end. He arrived quietly, Zahir ibn Rashid, Tariq's legitimate son, a man with a cold gaze, dark eyes, and natural elegance. He was 35 years old, and though the blood of the desert flowed in him, he was a graduate of international law from the University of London. He was reserved, educated, spoke 5 languages, and had observed from afar for 7 years. He didn't appear when his father collapsed, nor when he died, nor when the will was read. But now something bothered him: the lack of answers. A woman hiding deep in Spain, inaccessible, untouchable, and wealthy. Zahir never accepted this story. Old Tariq dying on his wedding night with a 19-year-old virgin, and she receiving a portion of the fortune seemed unfair. It was a clear morning when he first drove into Cadiz. He rented a black car and drove alone on the road crossing the vineyards. From the outside, southern Spain seemed calm, but inside him, everything was tense and alert. He was dressed in a white shirt with sleeves rolled up to the elbows, dark suit trousers, and a simple but expensive watch. There was no smile on his face, only focus. He parked the car in front of Ayla's house. The gates were closed, and surveillance cameras stood on the sides. One guard watched him from afar. Zahir waited with the window open and his hand on the wheel. "Can I help you?" the guard asked curtly. "I am here to speak with Miss Ayla," Zahir replied with a clear accent and firm tone. "She is not receiving visitors." "I am Zahir ibn Rashid." The guard swallowed, didn't answer immediately, quickly made a call, and returned. "She will not see you." Zahir just nodded, didn't argue. He slowly backed away, as if it were part of the plan. And it was. He knew he couldn't reach her with a visit, knew she was protected, knew that if he wanted answers, he would have to act differently. That night, Ayla slept poorly. There was something strange in the air, an unusual vibration at the gate. She felt that someone was nearby, and it wasn't a journalist. The next day, Zahir checked into a hotel 3 kilometers away using a fictitious name and began to observe. He learned where Ayla bought bread, what time the guard's shift changed, how many times a week she walked in the yard, and, most curiously, she lived alone. Absolutely alone. In his hotel room, Zahir recorded everything: photos, times, details. Not out of obsession, but out of strategy. He wanted to understand what was with this woman. She seemed inaccessible, but with an empty gaze. She seemed confident, but never left the house. She seemed guilty, or was it that he wanted to believe it? For the first time, Zahir doubted her facade. The way she held cups with both hands, how she avoided looking men in the eye, how her shoulders were always tense. There was something that didn't resemble the behavior of a mercenary woman. On the 4th day, he saw her at the store. She was distracted, choosing apples. He almost approached to talk, but stopped. He felt she was not just a mystery, but a minefield. If he made a wrong move, everything would explode. He didn't leave. After the first attempt to talk, at the gate was rejected. Zahir stayed nearby, quietly, strategically. He began to frequent the same places, the same bakery, the same store, the same path she walked in the evenings. She noticed, felt his gaze, even when he pretended not to look. But she didn't tell the guards, nor the neighbor, nor herself. She knew who he was and why he had come. In the 3rd week, Zahir appeared at the house door, composed and impeccably dressed. A crisp white shirt with sleeves rolled up, a light gray jacket, and polished shoes. "I haven't come for retribution," he assured the guard who had moved to stop him. Ayla, from an upper floor, heard his words but didn't descend. "I simply wish to converse," he insisted. 10 minutes, no cameras, no accusations." Silence followed. "I just hope to uncover the truth." More silence. The guard slowly closed the gate. Zahir didn't argue. He turned and departed. Yet, he returned the following day, and the day after, and again. Ayla began to ponder if his desire was genuinely for answers or merely to unsettle her. That Saturday afternoon, she was tending to the plants in her garden. Zahir emerged on the other side of the fence. "Such beautiful blossoms," he remarked. A slight nod of his head. She continued to water the lavender roots, seemingly absorbed in her task. "I only seek to understand," he explained, "and you are the sole person who can offer that insight." Ayla paused her watering, looking up to meet his gaze for a few moments. "What precisely do you wish to know?" she asked, her voice reaching him for the first time. Zahir slowly moved closer to the fence. "Was there ever any intimacy between you and my father?" Ayla offered no immediate response. Her expression remained unchanged. No surprise, no anger, just a quiet stillness. "Did you ever feel his touch?" he continued gently. "Or did he touch you?" She turned away, resuming her care of the plants. Zahir remained standing, taking measured breaths, as if silently counting to 10. "And the will, was that arrangement your suggestion?" he finally inquired. She released the hose. "Are you finished?" "For today, yes," he replied. "Indeed, for today, yes." He stepped back and departed. He returned the following week, this time without speaking directly. Instead, he left a modest basket at her door, an assortment of fruits, some mint tea, and an envelope containing a card. I don't wish to cause you discomfort. I merely seek to comprehend what my father discerned in you, Zahir had written. She neither replied nor returned the basket. The ensuing days unfolded in brief, unassuming encounters, a distant nod, casual remarks about the weather, a gaze that lingered a touch longer than necessary. And in each of Ayla's subtle movements, Zahir found himself increasingly perplexed. She didn't appear cynical, nor did she seem cold. Rather, she seemed to carry a quiet vulnerability. This was more challenging to reconcile than any accusation. It happened quite by chance. Zahir had spent the day immersed in legal affairs in Seville, but his thoughts drifted beyond the documents. He returned to his hotel in the evening, feeling a subtle tension and restlessness. He found himself weary of Isla's evasiveness, her avoidance of questions, her reserved glances, her lack of explanation. Always composed, always private, always just beyond reach. In the hotel corridor, he inadvertently overheard a hushed conversation between the receptionist and a maid. "She's rather peculiar, isn't she?" I've never seen that woman genuinely smile. And it's no surprise, considering what they say she endured, that nothing truly happened. That the old gentleman passed away before, she was never intimate. Zahir paused, his attention caught. The young women noticed his presence. "Oh, excuse us, sir, we weren't aware you were there. Who shared that information?" he asked softly. The nurse who attended to his body said he was untouched, as if nothing had occurred. Zahir remained silent for a moment, then simply walked away. The next day, he arrived at Ayla's gates earlier than his usual time. "I need to speak with her," he informed the guard. This time, she permitted it. He awaited her in the garden. She sat, her legs draped modestly with a white sheet, holding a cup of tea. Zahir approached with a sense of purpose, but his gaze was subtly altered, devoid of anger, holding a deeper complexity. "Is it true?" he inquired directly, "that there was never any intimacy between you and my father?" Isla raised the cup to her lips, her eyes steady on his. "What difference does it make now?" "A significant one," he replied, then no. Zahir's brow furrowed. "No, he did touch you. You mean the marriage was recognized. Is that what you wish to convey?" "Yes, I seek the truth." Ayla stood up, calm and firm. She approached and stopped a few steps from him. "Yes, the marriage was legalized. Is that what you wanted to know?" "Yes." Zahir looked at her. "Do you swear?" "I swear," Ayla said, looking him in the eyes. She paused for a few seconds, then, quietly, reservedly, and defiantly said, "Then, prove it." Ayla froze. Her gaze wavered for a moment, for a second, and he saw it. Zahir saw the fear, the doubt, the blush rising on her neck. She wasn't a master of lies. She was a master of silence. "I don't need to prove anything," she finally said, "but I just said it happened. If it happened, it's in the past." Zahir took a step forward. She didn't back down. "Because if it didn't happen," he whispered, "you wouldn't have a right to the inheritance. You don't need to remind me. I know exactly what's at stake." "Then why are you lying?" She took a deep breath, looked at the sky, and said in a tone mixed with pain and defensiveness, "Because sometimes telling the truth means protecting no one." He fell silent. Her face was firm, but her eyes were broken. And at that moment, Zahir felt something he didn't expect. It wasn't anger, not contempt. It was desire and guilt, because he was starting to want to understand this woman, but also starting to want to touch her. And it burned. In the following days, Ayla tried to pretend nothing had changed. She watered the plants at the same time, brewed tea at the same temperature, walked the garden stones as if floating within herself. But everything in her was more alert, more tense. Zahir didn't appear for 3 days. No gift baskets, no notes, no provocations. She should have felt relieved, but she was uneasy. At noon on the 4th day, he appeared without warning. Dressed in black, his shirt hugging his body, no jacket, no formalities. His eyes seemed deeper, his face closed off. She saw him from the terrace and slowly descended. "Have you come to demand another answer?" she asked in the garden. "No, not to bring back doubts." She frowned. Zahir pulled an old newspaper clipping from his pocket and showed her the headline. "Spanish widow inherits fortune of Arab sheikh after mysterious wedding night." "Did you leak this?" he asked. Isla froze. She read the headline as if for the first time, but she already knew it. had already read it, reread it, and swallowed dry blood. Not me, she replied calmly. Because it was beneficial, he insisted. Then the idea that the night happened kept the will valid. Not me and Barara, she repeated. But you benefited, didn't you? Her silence hurt more than any scream. Zahir took a step forward. She didn't back down. So, it's clear, he whispered. You lied, and you liked it. I survived, she replied, looking him directly in the eyes. Liked it? He scoffed bitterly, a corner of his mouth curving. It wasn't mockery, but anger at himself. You're good at this. At what? At saying nothing but driving everyone crazy. She took a deep breath, turned to go back into the house, but he followed her. Wait, she stopped, not looking. Is that all, he asked? You survived? She turned again and met his gaze. And you? Why are you here? For revenge, justice, or curiosity? His gaze darkened. Words disappeared. Only the body remained. He came too close, his chest almost touching hers. The warmth of his breath was felt between them. Ayla felt her heart beat faster. Don't do that, she said softly. What is that? He asked, but didn't back away. His hands almost touched her. Almost, but not quite. She held her breath and took a step back. It's time for you to leave. Zahir remained standing, his eyes on her, pulse quickening, desire hidden beneath the surface. You don't hate me, Ayla? Maybe I should, but I don't hate you. She didn't answer, turned her back, and entered the house. Zahir was left alone in the garden. The sun began to set, and his body burned from within. He didn't know what he was looking for, but he knew where to find it. His father's old office in the Tangier house had been closed for many years. No one entered, not even the lawyers. But Zahir entered. The air smelled of old leather, polished wood, and silence. Maps, books in Arabic, stacks of papers. Nothing was in its place, and that bothered him. After several hours of digging through folders, he found, deep in a double-bottom drawer, the contracts for the purchase of Ayla's family winery, signed by shell companies linked to Tariq. It was like a punch to the gut. Tariq had bought the winery long before the bankruptcy. He was a hidden partner and gradually sabotaged the family business, siphoning money, destabilizing exports, secretly pressuring creditors. It wasn't an accident, not a failed business. It was deliberate. Zahir understood everything. His father destroyed what she had to save her. Then he turned her ruin into the perfect condition for marriage, not out of love, but to possess her. Zahir sat in his father's chair, looking at the documents. Nearby lay a separate folder with photos, copies of letters, and reports about Ayla's life before the wedding. At 17, 18 years old, at wine fairs, at home with her family, at university. She was being watched even before she knew she would be sold. She was already marked. Zahir's blood ran cold. Ayla was not mercenary. She was a target. Carefully chosen. And his father was not a sick man who died prematurely. He was a predator who knew exactly what he was doing. Back at the hotel that night, Zahir didn't sleep a wink. Ayla's face flashed in his thoughts. How she avoided eye contact, kept silent, held back, responded sharply. He understood. She never lied, never tried to touch anyone. She was silent to survive, and she paid for it every day. The next morning, Zahir asked his last question to one of his father's old lawyers. Why did no one question the legalization of the marriage? Why did no one dare to doubt? Because to assume that the Sheikh did not consummate the marriage would be to call the deceased impotent and publicly insult his memory. None of the sons wanted to bear that shame, not even you, Zahir. Silence meant everything. So Ayla received the inheritance not because she was recognized as a wife, but because the whole world was afraid to tell the truth. And in the end, she didn't inherit. She carried a burden. Zahir closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The man who swore to protect his father's honor now had to decide whether to protect a memory or free the woman he destroyed. With each passing day, it became harder for him to look at Ayla without feeling that somehow she was everything his father never dared to be, a free and silently defiant individual. In the evening, Zahir returned without warning, without guards, without a mask on his face. Ayla was already waiting for him, as if she had sensed his steps in the garden even before the sound of the gate. She said nothing, just opened the door and let him in. The silence between them lasted more than a minute, but inside, everything screamed. Zahir approached slowly, not invading, not rushing. Forgive me, Ayla, he finally said, for everything. She just felt it. He took a deep breath. I didn't come to take anything from you. I know, Isla replied softly. Zahir took a step forward, slowly raised his hand, and touched her face with his fingertips. Her skin was warm, her cheeks flushed. He ran his fingers along her jawline, the curve of her chin. Ayla didn't pull away. Her eyes were fixed on his. In her gaze was fear, but also desire, tension, and anticipation. Then he gently took the back of her head, and his lips met hers. It was a strong, warm, wet kiss. His tongue entered without invitation, as if he knew exactly where to go. He explored with precision, dominated the space. She moaned on his lips, the sound hoarse, between pain and pleasure. Zahir bit her lower lip hard, then licked it, then repeated. His hands clenched on her waist, hers on his hips, on his shoulders. Her body leaned into his, as if wanting to dissolve into that touch. It was a kiss of urgency, anger, desire, fear, and hunger. When he pulled back a few millimeters, still pressing his forehead to hers, their breathing was ragged. Ayla, he whispered hoarsely. She just said, stay. In that warm room, bathed in the gentle light of the setting sun filtering through the window's subtle openings, Ayla slowly began to reveal herself. Her hands trembled slightly. There was no grand romance, no accompanying music, just the intimate sound of their breathing. Zahir watched, as if seeking silent permission with his eyes, but he still didn't reach out. She removed her garments, a quiet act of surrender. He approached, his fingers tracing lightly over her collarbones, the gentle curve of her neck, the center of her chest. He moved downwards with a calm, assured touch, the touch of someone who understands, who guides, but who also waits. When she flinched almost imperceptibly, he paused. Is everything all right? He asked in a hushed tone. She nodded, her eyes shining with a mixture of dawning awareness and apprehension. It wasn't pleasure yet, it was a profound vulnerability. Zahir gently guided her down, then settled himself beside her. His body was warm, firm, the pressure of his thighs a controlled presence. His breathing deepened. Isla held her breath. He looked into her eyes and waited. I haven't experienced this before, she began, her voice a fragile whisper. Zahir simply responded, I know. Then he joined her, slowly, deeply, and with tender care. Ayla cried out softly in discomfort, closing her eyes and gripping the sheet, yet she didn't refuse or pull away. Her being opened for the first time, in a way that went beyond the physical. He paused, remaining still within her without rushing. She felt it, and he seemed to feel everything too. He kissed her neck, her chin, her lips, a soft nip, then a gentle lick, followed by a low murmur. His movements began slowly, then grew more confident, finally becoming strong. It brought a certain sensation, yet this sensation felt chosen, uniquely hers, for the very first time. His hand moved along her waist, then swept up her back with a growing intensity, with a deep yearning. He tangled his fingers in her hair. Ayla breathed heavily, but not from fear. It was something entirely new. She opened her eyes. Zahir looked at her as if seeing her true self for the very first time. She whispered, I am yours. He replied with a deep sincerity, No, you are my choice. He continued until her body trembled completely, until she wept, not fully understanding why, until everything within her seemed to exclaim, I am truly alive. Silence settled. The room remained warm, their bodies intertwined, their breathing gradually evening out. She lay on his chest with her eyes closed, and for the first time she felt a profound lightness. But the world beyond the window was still active, and the next day brought news that would alter everything. Days drifted by as if the world outside their quiet haven ceased to exist. The house felt alive with their presence, the room, the garden, the peaceful porch. Ayla and Zahir nurtured their connection with a quiet, almost daily, genuine urgency. It was more than mere desire. It was a profound need. He would awaken before her, observing her serene, sleeping face. She would await him in the evenings, her body warm, her eyes calmer. Their words were few, their touches many, as if they communicated in their own private language. But outside this personal world, every movement was observed. The maids whispered discreetly as she passed. Zahir's two brothers began to reappear at the old Andalusian palace, and watchful eyes followed every step. They are together, someone murmured. It's fleeting, another countered. She's merely trying to secure her inheritance, they speculated behind closed doors. Zahir feigned not hearing, but Isla perceived every subtle hint. Days turned into weeks. Her body began to subtly transform. First came a touch of morning queasiness, then a gentle fatigue, and finally, a missed cycle. She counted the days, then recounted them, sitting on the bed with her hands resting on her abdomen, attempting to grasp what she instinctively knew but couldn't yet articulate. She didn't share it with him. She couldn't. Memories of the particular clause in the contract, a detail no one else mentioned but which she never forgot, echoed in her mind like a quiet, unsettling decree. If she became pregnant less than a year after her husband's passing, the heir would forfeit her claim to the inheritance, unless the children were formally recognized by the deceased. But Tariq was gone, and Ayla had never been touched by him. If anyone discovered, if anyone suspected, if they investigated, she would risk losing everything. Not just the financial security, but her right to remain there, her evolving story, and perhaps even Zahir himself. One warm day, she experienced a slight, insignificant bleeding. Nothing alarming, but enough to make her complexion pale. She retreated to the bathroom, washing herself 3 times, then gazing at her reflection in the mirror. She was pregnant. She knew it, and it brought not joy, but a sense of a predetermined journey. That evening, Zahir embraced her from behind on the porch. "You seem a little distant," he gently inquired. "Just a bit tired," she replied. "Of me? Of everything?" He didn't press the matter, simply holding her a little closer. But Ayla held another secret within her Wamba secret that stirred, that grew, and that, when unveiled, held the potential to unravel everything. The following day, one of the oldest maids, a Moroccan who had served Tariq for decades, approached her with a cup of tea and whispered, "If it is a son, they will never allow him to inherit peacefully." Ayla froze, and in that instant, a profound sense of solitude washed over her. Ayla tried to keep everything as it was, the routine, the calm, the silence. But Zahir watched. She no longer ate in the mornings, and when she did, she swallowed slowly, without taste. She went to bed earlier and woke up with deeper eyes. The 3rd time she ran from the garden to the bathroom, covering her mouth with her hand, he said nothing but noticed. In the evening, when he hugged her from behind, something had changed. Her stomach was no longer the same. Almost imperceptibly, but he knew every curve of her body by heart, like a prayer, and there was something new, something growing. Ayla began to avoid the mirror, and he stopped asking. Until one sultry morning she stood by the window in a thin nightgown. Zahir saw her from afar and no longer doubted. The fabric clung to her slender body, but in the center was a small but obvious bump. Zahir quietly entered the room, his eyes burning. He didn't look around, went straight to her. Ayla stood by the window, wrapped in a blanket. She didn't notice him or pretended not to. His voice cut through the air. "How long were you going to hide this from me?" She froze. "When were you going to tell me, Ayla?" She slowly turned, pale face, eyes full of tears. "When? After it grows? After it's too late?" I was scared. "Scared of me?" He took a step forward, his voice low but firm. "Or scared of losing the inheritance?" She took a deep breath, met his gaze, didn't answer immediately. "Both." Zahir closed his eyes, ran a hand through his hair, turned his back, almost left, but stopped. He slowly turned, his gaze now not just angry, but wounded. "You hid this from me. You didn't lie, but you were silent, and that hurts too." Ayla took a deep breath, her eyes moist, but firm. "I didn't know how to tell you. When I realized, it was too late. I was scared." "Scared of what?" "Losing everything. Losing you. Losing this place. This tiny piece of peace." Zahir watched silently. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, restrained. "I have no doubt that this child is mine. What grieves me is knowing you went through this alone." She slowly approached and pressed her forehead to his chest. "But now I'm not alone." He hugged her, and at that moment, even with the war outside the walls, the silence between them seemed like a refuge. Zahir looked at her stomach. The bump was almost imperceptible, but it was already there. He gently ran his hands over it, as if touching something sacred. "They will try to take this from you, from the child, but they won't be able to." Ayla closed her eyes, breathing in sync with him, and he was already there, not as a son, not as an heir, but as a man. From that day on, everything accelerated. Glances multiplied, hidden questions turned into open accusations. Her half-sisters began appearing without warning. Aunt spoke loudly, as if she were deaf. She became paler, rounder. "She's hiding something." One of the old lawyers approached Zahir. "If this is confirmed, you understand the political weight, right?" Zahir only answered with a gaze that required no explanation. That same day, he called a meeting. The marble hall was cold, echoing with uncles, cousins, brothers, lawyers. Everyone was silent. Zahir entered alone, in black, with a firm gaze. Ayla is pregnant. The child is mine, and whoever dares to harm her or this child will have to go through me. Silence. You never accepted her existence. Now they will have to accept that she will stay. He took a deep breath. The heaviness in his chest turned into a decision. I inherited my father's name, but I did not inherit his mistakes. He turned and left. He knew the war had only just begun. The house seemed quieter than ever. Zahir returned from the meeting with a firm gaze, but a tired body. There was nothing more to say to the family. He had already said everything that mattered. Now he needed to say what had not yet been said to her. He found Ayla sitting on the terrace, barefoot, her eyes fixed on the gray sky. He slowly approached, sat beside her, not touching her. She broke the silence first. You must hate me. Why? For everything. For how it all began, for keeping silent for so long. Zahir took a deep breath. I hated the world for giving you so little, and I hated my father for thinking he could buy you. She turned her face in surprise, but he was not there to hurt. I don't want you out of pity, Ayla, not because of the child, not for honor. She looked him in the eyes. Then why? Zahir smiled slightly, that rare smile that was only his. Because now I want to choose you, with or without wealth, with or without a name. Ayla felt a lump in her throat, but didn't cry. I am no longer the girl who came here in fear, she said. Not the widow the world wanted to bury under his name, neither property nor scandal. I belong to myself. Zahir watched silently, as if waiting for what would happen next. Ayla touched her stomach, then his hand, and yet said, I want to be yours. Zahir moved closer, pressed his forehead to hers, and whispered, Then stay, but only if it's your choice, not mine, not out of fear. She felt it. Her eyes closed, her heart finally found peace. That night, there were no promises, no wedding rings, no solemn words. There was only them, lying, holding hands, while the whole world remained outside the walls. And, for the first time, Ayla didn't feel like she had to resist, because now she was where she chose to be. The sun began to rise when they arrived in a small village on the southern coast of Spain. No bodyguards, no witnesses, no family. The house outside was white with blue windows and a porch facing the sea. Inside, the house had 2 bedrooms, an open kitchen, and an inner courtyard with lavender. Only this, but for Ayla, it was enough. For the first time, it was enough. The wedding took place right in the courtyard. A local judge, invited by a friend of Zahir's, performed the ceremony. There was no wedding dress. She was in a light tunic, he in a white shirt and linen trousers. It was the simplest wedding they had ever seen, but for Ayla, it was the most real wedding she could dream of. When the judge concluded the ceremony, Zahir quietly approached. First, he kissed her forehead with reverence, then her lips with tenderness, but firmness. Their hands met calmly. Yes, came unhurriedly, and Ayla's eyes said everything that needed no words. The legal process proceeded quietly and slowly. Zahir's family filed a lawsuit contesting the will, attempting to annul the portion of the inheritance left to Ayla. They used her pregnancy as an argument to revoke the clause that stipulated that if she became pregnant less than a year after Tariq's death, she would lose her right to the inheritance. But Ayla didn't fight. She chose to surrender. She signed a voluntary document renouncing most of the property associated with Tariq's name. She kept a small plot of land in southern France that no one wanted to dispute. The old family winery, the only part of the story she insisted on keeping it enough to live far away, simply and freely. Zahir took only what was his and refused to touch what was hers. We are not here to repeat the past, he said. We are here to do things differently. And they did exactly that. In her new home, Ayla woke up early, drank tea on the porch, felt the cold ceramics under her feet, listened to the sea, and remembered who she was so she would never go back to that. Zahir made coffee, stroked her stomach before saying a word, and then kissed her calmly and sincerely. The child grew in silence, without noise, without pressure, without fear. That night, unhurriedly, he entered the room and found her sitting on the bed, her hair down, gaze calm, a quiet smile on her lips. She was waiting for him silently, and when he approached, she said, That night that was supposed to be my first was a nightmare. Fear, silence, pain. It wasn't love, it wasn't surrender. It wasn't me. Zahir sat beside her, took her hands, and replied, "Let this be your first, the only one that matters, ours." She nodded, and the kiss came before words. Hot, wet, real. His lips found hers as if returning home, with tongue, with desire, with reverence. They easily lay together, without rituals, without fear. They made real love, without the past, without debts, without shame. When Isla, already breathless, lay on his chest, he ran his hand over her stomach and whispered, "Now you are my wife, the mother of my child, and the love of my life." She smiled a full, free smile and replied, "Now I am your first by choice." Their story didn't begin like a fairy tale, but was woven from new beginnings, from scars turned into strength, from silence that became a refuge, from everything that only love can heal. If this story touched you, like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Here, in stories of love and romance, we believe that all pain deserves a new beginning, and every new beginning deserves to be told. Now, tell us in the comments where you are watching this story from. See you in the next video. Remember, some stories begin with pain but end with the salvation of our lives.